Hi, this is The Business Guy, and today we're diving into a topic that could mean the difference between you keeping your wealth secure or losing it all overnight. So what's all this fuss about offshore trusts and how they differ from domestic trusts? You've worked hard to gather your wealth, but it could all disappear if you're not prepared for a lawsuit that threatens your assets. And in this video, you'll learn the key differences between domestic and offshore asset protection trusts and discover which one is the best fit for your assets. Let's start by understanding what a trust is and how it can protect you. An asset protection trust is a written legal arrangement that allows you to protect your assets from lawsuits, offering one of the highest levels of protection available. Imagine this. You set up a trust, and within it, there's an LLC that holds your bank account and stock brokerage account. Your trust owns the LLC, adding another robust layer of protection and privacy to your assets. More importantly, the LLC gives you control while the waters are calm, and you are usually the initial manager of the LLC and the signatory on the bank account. Then when a legal threat could seize your assets, and a judge could force you to use your LLC manager role to hand over your assets to your opponent, our law firm trustee can step in to protect you. Now, let me share a quick story about a client named John Matthews, name changed for privacy. He was a successful entrepreneur, had spent over 30 years building his business empire from the ground up. He came to us after being blindsided by a lawsuit, and despite his extensive assets, he was vulnerable because his wealth was tied up in personal accounts and real estate. It's quite a shocking and tragic story, which I'll tell you the full detail about in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about domestic trusts. A domestic trust is a U.S.-based trust, which means it's subject to U.S. laws and courts. Now, this might seem like an advantage, no need to deal with foreign regulations, right? But here's the catch. A domestic trust might not offer the protection you think it does. For example, consider the case of a domestic trust established in Nevada if you live in California, Texas, Florida, New York, or any other state. That state will usually not recognize your trust, leaving your assets fully exposed. In fact, domestic courts can often demand that you turn over assets despite the trust. And if your domestic trustee, who is under the jurisdiction of the local courts, is ordered to turn over your assets, or his, or another real possibility, sit in jail for contempt of court, you know what his decision will be. Now, here's a statistic. Over 70% of domestic trust cases end up with some form of asset exposure when challenged in court. And that's a significant risk, especially when you've worked so hard to accumulate your wealth. Okay, so now let's shift gears to offshore trusts. An offshore trust is governed by the laws of another country, which is more favorable to you, the settlor, and the beneficiary of the trust. This means that your trustee can refuse to comply with demands from U.S. creditors or courts to surrender your assets. And the best part? Offshore trusts have an impeccable record of protecting assets. So it's not just theory, it's actual case law that shows that they work. For example, in the Cook Islands and Belize, the legal systems are designed to make it incredibly difficult for anyone to challenge your trust. Your opponent would need to travel to these jurisdictions, hire local lawyers, and then prove their case under a completely different legal system. The cost alone, often upwards of $100,000 for them, deters many lawsuits from even getting off the ground. Now consider this. We've handled thousands of trusts, and we've never seen a client lose their assets from one of our offshore trusts. And every time somebody tried to sue one of our clients with assets in our offshore trust, they either gave up or the trust prevented them from reaching the assets. Again, this isn't just theory, it's proven in practice. Okay, so now we'll tell you how to set up an offshore LLC and an offshore trust in just a moment. But first, the rest of the story as promised. John Matthews, the successful entrepreneur who had spent over 30 years building his business empire from the ground up, his journey had not been easy. Countless sleepless nights, risky decisions, you can probably relate to this, that could make or break his fortune, and relentless competition from rivals determined to see him fail. Yet through sheer determination and hard work, John managed to grow his wealth substantially. He owned multiple properties across the country. He had a diversified stock market portfolio and ran a thriving technology company. Life was good, and John felt invincible. But all of that changed one fateful afternoon when John received a certified letter from a law firm he had never heard of. Inside was a summons and complaint he was being sued. The lawsuit alleged that one of John's former business partners, somebody he had parted ways with years ago, was claiming breach of contract and seeking damages that could potentially bankrupt him. John's heart sank as he read the documents. The amount they were suing for was astronomical, more than he had in liquid assets, and the claims, while completely unfounded in his eyes, were serious enough to hold up in court. Panic set in. John's assets were all in his name. His bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, worse, his primary residence, a multi-million-dollar mansion on the coast, was also on the line. And he realized that if the courts ruled against him, everything he had worked so hard for could be seized to satisfy the judgment. It was a nightmare scenario that John had never anticipated. Desperate for a solution, John reached out to us, and when he joined the Zoom call, he was visibly shaken. He had a briefcase full of documents related to the lawsuit. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "I've worked my whole life for this, and it feels like it could all be gone in an instant." We knew time was of the essence. The lawsuit was moving quickly, and if John's assets remained in their current state, they would be easy pickings for the judgment creditors. After carefully reviewing his situation, we recommended setting up an offshore asset protection trust combined with a limited liability company. And this strategy would effectively place his assets beyond the reach of the U.S. court system, offering a layer of protection that domestic solutions simply couldn't provide. But implementing this plan was no small feat. There were legal hurdles, paperwork to navigate, and the constant pressure of the lawsuit looming over John's head. And we began by creating the Offshore LLC, which would be the new owner of John's assets. This LLC was established in a jurisdiction with strong asset protection laws, making it difficult, if not impossible, for creditors to access his assets held within it. We put each of his investment properties into separate land trusts. We made LLCs the beneficiaries of each land trust. Then we recorded equity stripping mortgages against his properties and a UCC1 lien against his business interest. Then we set up the Offshore Asset Protection Trust in a country known for its robust legal protections against foreign judgments. Like the Cook Islands, the trust could own a Cook Islands LLC, adding an additional layer of security. Transferring John's assets into the structure was a meticulous process that had to be done swiftly, but carefully to avoid any appearance of fraudulent transfer, which could have nullified the entire strategy if we set up a domestic trust. As we were working through this process, the pressure from the lawsuit intensified. John's former business partners, attorneys, were aggressive, filing motions and trying to freeze his accounts. They even attempted to place liens on his properties. Every day brought new challenges, and John felt like he was constantly under siege. But our team was prepared. We worked around the clock. After all, we're the largest asset protection company in the country, and we communicated with our international lawyers, filing the necessary paperwork, and ensuring that the asset transfers were legally sound and completed in record time. There were moments when it seemed like a lawsuit might overtake us, but we stayed the course. Finally, after weeks of tireless work, we completed the last step of the plan, and John's assets were now securely held within the LLC and the other structures owned by the Offshore Trust. The trust itself was governed by the laws of the Cook Islands, which did not recognize foreign judgments, meaning that even if the U.S. court had ruled against John, his wealth would remain protected. And when the day of reckoning came, the court did indeed rule in favor of John's former partner, awarding a substantial judgment against him. But when the creditors came knocking, they found themselves empty-handed. The assets they had expected to seize were out of their reach, locked away in an impenetrable fortress of legal protections. The LLC and the offshore trust that owned it had done their jobs, keeping John's life savings intact. John's relief was palpable. What had started as a terrifying ordeal ended in victory for him, and this lawsuit had been a wake-up call, and he realized that despite his wealth, he had been vulnerable. But now, thanks to the Asset Protection Trust and LLC, his financial future was secure, and in the aftermath, John decided to restructure his entire financial life. He diversified his holdings further, placed more assets into protected structures, and he made sure that every part of his estate was shielded from potential threats. He continued to grow his business, but with the peace of mind that came from knowing that his wealth was safe. Now, John's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of asset protection. In today's litigious society, even the most successful and careful individuals can find themselves targets of aggressive lawsuits. But with the right planning and structures in place, it is possible to protect what you've worked a lifetime to build. In the end, John's quick actions and the strategic use of an asset protection trust saved his fortune and his peace of mind. Okay, and as promised, how do you set up an offshore trust? It starts with contacting a professional with extensive experience in offshore trusts. And I might add, we've set up more offshore trusts than any firm in the nation. We appoint our qualified trustee law firm established in your preferred offshore jurisdiction. And this trustee is crucial because our trustee law firm can stand in the gap between you and your legal opponent to ensure your assets are protected according to the law. In fact, you don't even need to visit the country to set this up, but it's essential to choose a provider you can trust that has the proper experience. Next, the law requires KYC, know your client information. This might include a photocopy of your passport that a notary public certifies as a true copy of the original document, an original utility bill proving residential address, a bank reference letter are examples of items needed. This both protects and identifies you and the trustee so nobody can claim they're you. It also keeps the drug dealers and terrorists out of the industry, so it keeps things clean and reputable, just like you would want. Okay, let me share another example of a client who used an offshore trust in the Cook Islands. Frank Ross, a successful real estate developer, was hit with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from a disgruntled former partner. The stakes were high. His entire fortune was on the line. Desperate to protect his assets, Frank turned to an offshore trust in the Cook Islands. We quickly helped him set it up, appointed a trusted trustee, and a protector to manage the assets. As the lawsuit progressed, Frank's former partner's legal team tried every tactic in the book to seize his wealth. However, the Cook Islands' robust legal protections made it nearly impossible. The plaintiff would have needed to start a costly, uncertain lawsuit in the Cook Islands, a challenge too great to overcome. And realizing this, the lawsuit was dropped before it ever reached the court. Thanks to the offshore trust, his assets remained safe, providing the Cook Islands Trust was an unbreakable shield against the lawsuit. Okay, now continuing with the process. Finally, we draft and register your offshore trust. This trust document is the legal agreement that defines the terms and conditions. It includes everything from the names of the involved parties to the rules for distributing assets and resolving disputes. The trust document itself is not publicly filed. Simply the name of the trust is registered, but your association with it is not made public. Now here's a tip. Always work with a team that has set up hundreds of these trusts. Experience matters, and you want to ensure that every detail is handled correctly. Now, once the trust is established, you transfer your assets into the LLC that's inside the trust. Cash, stock, bonds, any other liquid assets into the LLC that's in the trust. And this step is crucial because it ensures your wealth is protected. And we usually use some of the strongest, safest banks in the world in Switzerland, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, and the like. And we put this structure together because it ensures your wealth is protected under the robust legal framework of your chosen offshore jurisdiction. And when you follow these steps, you can set up an offshore asset protection trust that provides you with the strongest asset protection in the world. So don't leave your hard-earned wealth exposed. Take action today. And if you're looking for help, finding trustees and protectors and the proper trust in the Cook Islands or other secure location like Belize, give us a call at 1-954-400-1050 or visit assetprotectionplanners.com for more free information, and you can fill out a free contact form while you're there. We've helped thousands of clients transfer their assets into offshore trusts, and we can do the same for you if that's what you need. I'll see you next time. This is the Business Guy, protecting your assets and your future.